Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. I can't quite understand how I ended up in this situation. Out of a sense of indifferent obligation, I sit here, half listening as the court-appointed marriage counselor drones on about rules, expectations, and other trivialities that, in my opinion, don't matter at all. My mind starts to wander as I take in the gloomy setting of her office. Lining the wall is a row of dark oak cabinets stuffed with books, most of which I bet she's never even opened. I'm sure she couldn't even pronounce the titles of half of them. The whole office tries too hard to look like a therapeutic space, standard diplomas on the walls, and an ultrasonic diffuser in the corner, emitting lavender or something equally uninspiring. At least the waiting room had a calming fountain, the kind you usually see in dental offices. I've always wondered if they use that soft water sound to mask the whine of drills or the muffled cries of unfortunate patients. I remember asking once, and they said the fountain was meant to soothe people while they waited. My first thought? Maybe I wouldn't need soothing if they didn't keep me waiting 50 minutes past my appointment time. My gaze shifts across the room to a wide, dark walnut desk between us. The two armchairs we're sitting in seem like relics from an era when comfort was a vague concept. They were probably last comfortable when Reagan was in office. The decor might have once been stylish, but now it all looks like she picked it up at a garage sale. Suddenly I realize she said something and is now looking at me, expecting a response. Her eyes pierce into mine. "Mr. Johnson, this is important. Are you even listening?" "Not particularly." "Could you repeat that?" I ask, trying to sound at least a little polite. Dr. Meredith Wiekenberg sighs slowly, clearly annoyed, and gives me the same look my fifth-grade teacher did when she caught me daydreaming. And what's up with her overly dramatic pronunciation of her last name? If she wanted to be called Marie, maybe she should have spelled it that way from the start. "Mr. Johnson, let me remind you that your presence here isn't just required. The court also demands your full participation. If I report that you're not cooperating, the judge could hold you in contempt of court." Protocol. I nod in response. "I understand, Dr. Wiekenberg." I'm not about to call her Marie. And why did I have to live in one of the few states that force people to attend marriage counseling? Mentally, I make a note to keep those thoughts to myself. I don't want to end up in a cell with people who robbed banks or embezzled millions just because I refuse to participate in this charade. "I get it, doctor. Please, repeat the question," I say, hoping to avoid any unnecessary issues with the judge. "Mr. Johnson," she pauses. "I'd appreciate it if you'd call me Frank," she replies. "What? But isn't your name Thomas?" she asks, confused. "Yes, but I've always liked the name Frank better." "All right, Mr. Johnson," she continues after a brief pause, as though deciding to let it go. "What are your expectations for these sessions?" I can't hold back a slight chuckle. To my surprise, I think I see a faint glimmer of humor in her eyes. Maybe by the end of this, we won't hate each other entirely. Honestly, the only thing I expect is to walk out of here divorced. At those words, the atmosphere shifts. My wife, sitting to my left, begins to sob loudly. Dr. Wiekenberg opens her mouth to respond, but stops, instead turning toward Ruby. My soon-to-be ex-wife hasn't stopped crying since we walked in. When asked the same question, she launched into a passionate speech about her mistakes and her desperate desire for one more chance to prove her love for me. And so, the session drags on. Sitting here, I can't help but reflect on the absurdity of the situation I found myself in. My wife, the woman I've been married to for 17 years, the educated mother of our 3 young children, has decided that she needs to sleep with another man. And not just any man, but Chandler Bisbee, a second-rate actor in a late-night soap opera she's obsessed with. He's not even the main star of that ridiculous show. It all started so innocently. We decided to go out for dinner without any special reason. Lately, I'd noticed she seemed increasingly restless with the daily routines of looking after the kids and breaking up their fights. To add some variety to our lives, I arranged with her parents to watch the kids and booked us a room at a nice hotel for the night. The plan was simple: a quiet dinner, a heartfelt conversation, and maybe even a bit of dancing. I've never been much of a dancer, but Ruby has always enjoyed it. She's always been graceful on the dance floor. To surprise her, I even took a few dance lessons. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I just didn't want to embarrass her. Honestly, I thought things were going well. The evening was unfolding just as I had planned. We enjoyed a wonderful dinner and then headed to the hotel club. We swayed to a slow, romantic rhythm, her head resting on my shoulder, whispering words in my ear that made me dream of what was to come later. But at that moment, when I was savoring this moment, I felt someone tap my shoulder. I turned around and saw a man about my age staring directly at Ruby. "Mind if I cut in?" he asked, though it was obvious he didn't care about my response. He didn't even look at me. Before I could say anything, he'd already led her away, leaving me standing there like a statue. I stood there, bewildered, feeling everyone's eyes on me. All I wanted was to go back to our table and quietly drink my bourbon, avoiding any sort of scene. Maybe 30 minutes passed, maybe even more, before Ruby finally returned to the table. She was calm, as if nothing unusual had happened. Taking a long sip from her cocktail, she casually said, "That was Chandler Bisbee," she said, as if it was something perfectly ordinary. "Who the hell is Chandler Bisbee?" I managed to say, barely containing my anger. "He's an actor from my favorite show," she replied, entirely unaffected. "If he's so famous, why haven't I heard of him? Don't you have like a dozen favorite shows?" I snapped, trying to keep control. Despite everything, I was still hoping the evening could be salvaged, that maybe Ruby and I could somehow turn things around. I was still holding on to the idea that she'd want to try that new position she'd mentioned before, something called the wheelbarrow. But my hopes crumbled when she sighed dreamily. "Chandler is such a good dancer." Suppressing my irritation, I stood up and extended my hand. "That's wonderful, dear. But how about we finish our dance? We were interrupted." She didn't move. "I already promised Chandler I'd save the rest of the dances for him tonight," she said indifferently. "What?" My voice rose before I could stop myself. "What did you just say?" "Sit down, Thomas," she whispered sharply, glancing around. "You're attracting attention." I felt the world spinning around me but sat down, sinking into the chair in complete bewilderment. Looking around the room, I felt utterly humiliated. And then I saw him, Bisbee, sprawled lazily at the other end of the room, a smug smirk on his face like a real jerk. Before I could process the situation, Ruby broke my trance by speaking again. "Listen, Tommy, I love you. I know you love me too. But I'm going to spend this weekend with Chandler. When I come back on Sunday, I'll be the same wife I've always been, faithful, loving, in every way." I stared at her, trying to grasp what she was saying. "It's just something I need to do for myself, just once. I promise," she added, as if that somehow made it better. Then she leaned over, gently kissed me on the cheek, and stood up to leave. Finally, my body reacted. I grabbed her hand, gripping it tightly, as if holding her could somehow keep her from leaving my life, even if only for the weekend. "Ruby, you need to listen to me because I won't repeat myself. We still have a chance to save our marriage, but if you go to him, I'll file for divorce first thing on Monday." My voice was calm and restrained, but she dismissed it with a wave as if she were bored. "Are you seriously going to throw everything away over this?" she replied, irritation in her voice. "Are you really ready to be a weekend dad, living in a cramped one-bedroom apartment, barely making ends meet, all because of something this trivial? Grow up, Tommy. We'll talk when I get back on Sunday evening." With that, she left, not realizing the seriousness of my words. When she returned late on Sunday, the kids were already at her parents', and I had left, precisely 200 miles away, staying in my brother's basement, with no intention of returning. On Monday morning, I sat in the attorney's office preparing the divorce papers. The lawyer noted that Ruby was right in her prediction about life after divorce, though not entirely. I'd lose 35% of my income, not 30. But I didn't care about the math. The moment she dismissed me so indifferently, my love for her extinguished, like a candle in the wind. Only anger toward her remained, along with heart-wrenching sorrow over having to leave the kids. but no regrets could change my decision. One day I hope to explain it all to the kids, even if they don't understand or forgive me. When Ruby returned and found the note I'd left on the kitchen table, along with my wedding ring, a torn photo from our wedding, and my phone and laptop, she panicked. She tried contacting me at work, but they informed her I was on emergency leave. The secretary also warned her she could no longer come to the office, and that if she caused trouble, the company would file for a restraining order. I didn't learn about this immediately, but her parents later told me how she broke down upon finding what I had left behind. She burst into tears, and when she finally reached her parents' home, the weight of her actions began to sink in. For the following week, she and the kids rarely left the house. Her mental state deteriorated sharply, and her parents began to fear she might need hospitalization. She stopped eating, refused to sleep, and the kids were terrified. At her wits' end, her mother slapped Ruby, screaming that she had destroyed everything and needed to pull herself together for the kids. I almost regret not being there to witness that moment. The next day, a bailiff arrived at her parents' house to officially serve Ruby with the divorce papers. Her parents were shocked when I explained the situation to them, but, to my surprise, they took my side. They even helped me maintain contact with the children. One day they asked if I could ever forgive their daughter, whom they now referred to as dead to them. My answer was simple: no. After that, they never mentioned Ruby again, focusing solely on their grandchildren. I'll always be grateful to them for that. In the following weeks, there were numerous negotiations between our lawyers. Ruby's side kept pushing for meetings, hoping I'd agree to talk with her, but I refused each time. I first saw her again at a court-mandated counseling session. There were other sessions our lawyers tried to set up, but my attorney assured me I wasn't obligated to attend, so I didn't. Meanwhile, Ruby grew increasingly emotional, convinced that one conversation could fix everything. The irony was rich. One conversation had destroyed it all. When we finally met in court, I avoided her gaze. She tried to speak to me, but I gave no response. In hindsight, that was probably not the smartest move. Her attempts to communicate, coupled with my refusal to respond, angered the judge so much that he ordered us to attend joint counseling sessions. By then, I was filled with such rage that calling it anger issues would be an understatement. I even considered skipping the sessions, but my lawyer persuaded me not to. I briefly thought about quitting my job and disappearing altogether, but my lawyer reminded me that running away wouldn't free me from my financial obligations. Besides, I couldn't do that to my children. The answer was clear to me before I'd even considered the question. And here I am, sitting at the first of 12 court-mandated counseling sessions, already feeling like this is a waste of time. Since the moment I first met Dr. Wickenberg, I immediately understood that nothing would be getting better anytime soon. My brief moment of contemplation was interrupted by her next question. It seemed my wife had finished talking, and now all attention was back on me. "Mr. Johnson, is there anything you'd like to say to your wife?" she asked, maintaining a calm tone. "She mentioned that you haven't spoken since the incident. The incident where she left me stranded on the dance floor to spend the weekend with her new boyfriend? Is that the incident you're referring to?" I snapped, each word dripping with sarcasm. "Mr. Johnson, those kinds of remarks don't contribute to progress," she replied, her composure unwavering. "Well, that incident didn't do me any favors either, Doctor," I retorted, crossing my arms. "I understand, and I genuinely regret that you had to go through that." "No, Doctor, I have nothing to say to her," I said, leaning back in the chair, hoping to simply disappear into it. An awkward silence filled the room. No one spoke a word, and I assumed both women were surprised. After all, I hadn't spoken to Ruby in over 5 months. Why start now? Yet Dr. Wickenberg remained composed. "All right, Mr. Johnson, could you describe how you felt when Ruby left you that night?" she asked, no longer hiding behind polite phrases. I didn't know how to explain it without breaking down, and I definitely didn't want Ruby to see how shattered I was. The doctor seemed to notice my hesitation. "Why do you think Ruby would take any satisfaction from seeing that?" she asked, genuinely curious. Before I could respond, Ruby interjected, "Can you at least look at me, Tommy?" Ignoring her request, I kept my gaze on Dr. Wickenburg. "Please try to express your feelings," she gently insisted, her posture attentive, hands folded, patiently waiting. "I have never felt pain like that in my life," I began, my voice barely holding back the overwhelming emotions. "And the only conclusion I've come to is that she did it to hurt me so deeply that I could never forgive or forget." "And what was the most painful part?" The doctor stayed silent, but her expression encouraged me to continue. "She said it didn't matter. She said that destroying our trust meant nothing to her." Suddenly, Ruby's sobs grew louder, filling the room. Both the doctor and I turned to look at her. Her breathing became ragged and I feared she might pass out. "Should we call someone?" I asked, genuinely concerned. She looked as though she was about to faint. For the first time, Dr. Wickenburg appeared uncertain, so I decided to step in myself. "Ruby, calm down. If you stop crying, I promise I'll talk to you," I said in a softer voice. Her eyes cleared slightly, and she began to struggle to regain control over her emotions. I glanced at the doctor, who gestured for me to slow down. We waited in silence as Ruby slowly regained her composure. After what felt like an eternity, her sobs quieted, and she looked at me with tear-filled eyes. "Are you really going to talk to me?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Yes, Ruby, I will, I promise. But you have to stay calm," I said firmly. "Remember that night? You told me to act like an adult, and that we'd discuss everything when I got home?" "Yes," she replied, her voice fragile. "So let's pretend this is that night, and we'll have that conversation now." She wiped her nose and nodded, her sobs now reduced to faint sniffles. We sat in silence, and I couldn't help but think about how Dr. Wickenburg was earning $200 an hour without giving any real advice. Instead, she just sat there, observing. Finally, after a long silence, I spoke up. "Ruby, do you have any idea of the damage you've caused? Do you understand what you did to me?" "I think I do," she whispered, her voice shaking. "And I'm so sorry. But I swear, I never wanted things to turn out this way." "It's not about what you intended to do. It's about how it affected me," I said, my voice laden with gravity, leaving no room for doubt. "You broke me, and when you downplayed it, calling your actions insignificant, it shocked me. Do you even understand what the most important thing a husband can give his wife is?" She shook her head in silence. "Loyalty," I continued. "I won't claim to speak for all men, but I believe that men aren't naturally inclined toward monogamy. Even so, I took pride in staying faithful to you. It wasn't difficult, even though I had opportunities." I paused, allowing the weight of my words to settle. "You've always expected a lot. I know that. But for me, it was more than just meeting your expectations. Being faithful to you meant everything to me. That promise was sacred. And you traded it for a weekend with some second-rate actor? It destroyed me. I can't put into words the depth of that pain." I felt the tension mounting, but I wasn't finished. "And then, on top of everything, you dared to threaten me." Ruby's eyes widened in shock. "I never threatened you," she exclaimed. "Yes, Ruby, you did. You warned me about what would happen if I dared to file for divorce. I remember every word. Those words tore me apart." I could still hear them, as if it were yesterday. "You said, 'Tommy, stop being so dramatic. You're not going to destroy the family over something so trivial. Do you really want to be a part-time father, living in a tiny apartment, barely scraping by on 30% of your income?" Her expression changed as she realized what she had said, and she covered her mouth with her hand. "Oh no, Tommy. That wasn't a threat. You misunderstood. I was just explaining what divorce would mean for our family. It doesn't matter what you meant, Ruby. What matters is how it made me feel. You can't control my feelings. Your explanation changes nothing." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of everything we had gone through hanging over me. But the final blow, Ruby, was the loss of intimacy. We've talked about this before, about how, at the end of life, the most meaningful memories come to mind. If you've lived a good life, those moments bring you peace in your final minutes. Ruby began to cry quietly again, but this time it was different, as if she had finally accepted what was to come. Can you honestly say that the weekend you spent with Bisbee won't be one of those moments you'll remember when looking back on your life? I asked softly. She didn't need to answer. We both already knew. In reality, that weekend will probably mean more to you than all of our intimate moments together, won't it? I asked, though the answer was clear. How am I supposed to compete with that for the next 25 years? My voice was tense, barely a whisper. A long silence followed. Ruby's tears stopped, and she looked at me as if finally realizing the finality of my words. That's what you took from me, Ruby, I said, my voice calm. She exhaled slowly, the tension hanging in the air between us. After a long pause, she spoke, her tone resigned. We can't fix this, can we? It wasn't a question. She already knew the answer. No, we can't. I continued, now speaking calmly. We have two options. We can keep wasting time and money on this facade of therapy, or we can commit ourselves to doing everything for the kids. They deserve at least that, for us to make this process as smooth as possible. Do you agree? At that moment, Dr. Wiekenberg finally intervened, reminding us that our session for the week was over. She noted that we had made progress today. Ruby shook her head in disbelief. We both stood up and headed to the door. We left separately as we had arrived, each in our own car. Before we parted, we agreed to meet again, not to restore our relationship, but to decide how to move forward for the sake of our children. It was the only thing left. The next day, Ruby met with her lawyer and decided to withdraw her request for consultations. A week later, we reached a mutual understanding about joint custody, choosing an arrangement that we thought would be best for the children and help avoid financial difficulties. The agreement also specified that we would spend major holidays together as a family. Perhaps this decision came too late, but we finally started behaving like responsible adults. 6 months later, our divorce was officially finalized. 10 years later, fast forward 10 years. Ruby and I found ourselves at our younger daughter Winslow's wedding, as she married a wonderful young man named Robert. We laughed and joked about finally having married off the last child, happily guessing that now we might have a little extra money and wouldn't have to shop at discount stores anymore. We shared a sense of pride, knowing that we had raised our children well. Things hadn't always been smooth. There were difficult times along the way, but the kids seemed to handle the divorce relatively well. At least it didn't scare them off from wanting to start families of their own, which we took as a positive sign. Interestingly, despite all these years since our divorce, neither Ruby nor I remarried or even entered serious long-term relationships. In many ways, we continued to function as a family. We saw each other often, especially on holidays, although as the kids became more independent, our meetings happened less frequently. We stayed in touch through email and messages, but Winslow's wedding was the first time we had met in person in over a year. At the reception, we allowed ourselves a few drinks, and Ruby caused a scene. She started crying, begging me to come back to her, forgetting that my beautiful wife, who had given me a son, was standing right beside me. Ruby was miserable. The children had grown up and left her utterly alone, and that's the most frightening thing, to be left all alone. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel. Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. Among phrases that cause anxiety, "we need to talk" ranks high, especially when it's followed by a formal address to a partner. When my wife's usual Seb turned into Sebastian, I sensed a foreboding shift. The end was near. I had already hired a private investigator, a man who looked like he stepped straight out of a classic film, to set up a recording device in a hotel room. This room was where my wife, Nora, shared her time with her boss, Daniel Taylor. Taylor, recently appointed as the executive vice president of sales at the company, appeared in every photo alongside my wife, each one attesting to an undeniable closeness between them. These images made my next steps clear. I resolved to get revenge. My plan required patience, and I maintained an outward calm, biding my time for the right moment. The next week dragged on endlessly. Nora, who once eagerly shared details of her workday with me, now spoke less and less, as if words slipped away from her with each passing evening. I asked her questions. How was your day? Who did you have lunch with? How's the new boss? Each time she hesitated, gave a vague answer, and then quickly changed the subject. Our evenings grew heavy with silent tension, while the detective continued his close watch. Every Friday, like clockwork, Taylor would step out to call clients mid-morning. 10 minutes later, Nora would leave the office, claiming she had an appointment with the chiropractor. Their destination was a cheap motel on the edge of town. With all the evidence gathered, I was ready to expose their affair when the time was right. My moment arrived. I stopped by the company shortly after Nora left and asked Maria, the secretary, to pass her a message. Her husband had come by to surprise her with an invitation to lunch. Maria smiled politely and replied, "Oh, Mr. Brown, your wife just left for a doctor's appointment." Every time, it seemed, this doctor's appointment took precedence over lunch together. "Thank you," I said, trying not to show any reaction, though inside I was burning. I already had my phone ready, knowing Nora wouldn't dare ignore a call during a busy reporting period. The phone rang, and I heard her cheerful, practiced voice. "Good afternoon, this is Nora Brown." I steadied myself. "Is everything all right?" I asked. She paused, surprised. "What's going on?" I told her that I had come by to surprise her with lunch, only to find out she had gone to her usual Friday appointment. I tried to sound as calm as possible, asking, "Are you all right?" Her answer was cold. Just a routine chiropractor visit. But there was an edge of irritation in her tone, as if, according to plan, her tension was bound to spill over later when she met with her partner. "Funny," I replied. "I recently saw Dr. Vilchak, and he mentioned he hadn't seen you for over a year. Asked if you'd found another doctor." Silence fell on the line. "So, what's the name of your new chiropractor?" She snapped back. "I don't have time to discuss this now. We'll talk in the evening," and hung up. Fridays were usually our pizza night, and this evening was no exception. I was just tipping the delivery guy when Nora's car pulled into the garage. "Finally," I muttered as she walked through the door. "I feel unwell," she mumbled, passing me and heading straight upstairs. Shortly after, the bathroom door closed behind her. Hours later, when I joined her in bed, she lay there, still awake. I leaned in and quietly asked one last question. Why all the secrecy around the doctor visits? Is there something I should know? I was resolute. "Nora, I can't go on like this anymore. You need to let me in. Tell me what's happening." She waved me off, barely meeting my eyes. "Please don't push me," she muttered. "Honestly, everything's fine." The day had drained me, and my patience was running thin. "We'll talk tomorrow," I said, clinging to the hope she'd open up. But that night, as I lay in bed, I heard her muffled, barely audible sobs. She buried her face in the pillow, trying to stifle the sounds, though I doubted she found any real rest. Her anguish reminded me of Oedipus, haunted, tormented by the secrets within. Saturday arrived, and Nora was on edge, snapping at minor things. If we had a pet, it would wisely stay out of her way. Despite her promise, the conversation about the doctor never happened, and every time I brought it up, she deflected. She avoided me most of the day. Finally, after lunch, I managed to catch her alone. Trying to lighten the mood, I said, "I booked us a table at the Crab for 7. You love that place. Maybe it'll help?" She just shrugged, her face expressionless. I left her alone, but an hour later, I found her sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall. I entered with a box from her favorite boutique. "I have a little surprise for you," I said, handing her the box. She didn't open it or react, and the silence grew heavy. "I thought you might want to wear it tonight," I added, hoping to ease the tension. When she finally came downstairs, dressed in the new outfit, I told her how beautiful she looked. "I had one more gift, saving it for a special occasion," I said, offering her another box. "But now seems like the right time." She tore off the wrapping, peeked inside, and suddenly began to cry. "They'll go perfectly with your dress," I said quietly, hoping the pearls might bring her a small measure of happiness. But dinner passed in awkward silence. She spoke so softly that the waitress had to lean in to hear her order. Even after 3 glasses of wine, her lips remained tightly sealed. Most of her meal went untouched and was eventually packed to go. When we returned, she exited the car before I had even unbuckled. She paused, glanced back for a moment. "Thank you," she mumbled. Those were the first words she'd spoken in hours. I watched her go upstairs and shut herself in the bathroom. I approached quietly and listened. My suspicions were confirmed. She was talking to Taylor, likely calming him, perhaps assuring him they'd be together soon. Back in my study, a heavy sense of despair washed over me. I took a small bottle from my pocket and swallowed a few pills, a habit I'd developed since discovering her infidelity. It was the only thing that kept my mind from crumbling. Later, I saw her downstairs again, holding a glass, still in the black dress I had gifted her. Despite everything, I couldn't deny how captivating she looked. She noticed my gaze but quickly turned away. Even though I had prepared myself for this, the realization still hit hard. Trying to stay composed, I pretended to read as she finally entered the room. She lingered in silence, which felt like an eternity, then broke it with small talk. "Sebastian," she said softly, "is that book interesting?" Her detached tone and downcast eyes spoke volumes. Our marriage was over. I had been preparing for this conversation for weeks, rehearsing my response, convincing myself to stay calm. Carefully marking my page, I closed the book and replied, "Not as interesting as our marriage once was." Meeting her gaze, I asked, "What's on your mind, Nora? Can you finally tell me what's bothering you?" Her eyes filled with tears, and I softened my voice. "What happened, my love?" Gently taking her hands, I waited in silence, hoping she would finally give me an answer. She was already crying. "Did the doctor give you bad news?" I asked, feeling the tension in the room as thick as fog. "No," she replied, her voice cutting through the silence. "Is it about your mother? Did something happen to her?" I asked gently, trying not to rush, but she shook her head. "Then, could it be something with your father?" I managed to ask before she firmly shook her head again. "I'm fine, really, it's something else," she mumbled. Trying to comfort her, I stood up and slowly pulled a chair away from the octagonal table, gesturing for her to sit. Once she sat down, I whispered, "I'll be right back." She looked up at me, her red, swollen eyes filled with confusion and pain. "Where are you going?" she asked. "Just for a minute," I replied, trying to reassure her. "I need to grab something upstairs." I headed to my study, opened the safe, and took out my briefcase and laptop. When I returned, she was sitting there, hands resting at her sides, her gaze distant and tired. I placed the bag next to me and began clearing the chess pieces from the board. Each piece fell to the floor with a dull thud, echoing in the stillness of the room. She watched me, her gaze a mix of sadness and bewilderment. I opened my laptop and started typing. "What are you doing?" she asked, tension thick in her voice. I simply held a finger to my lips. "Almost done," I whispered. The room filled with the sounds of typing and her uneven breathing. After a few minutes, I gently closed the laptop. "There. Now please tell me what's on your mind," I softly urged. Her face twisted with emotion, and she began to cry again. I handed her a tissue, quietly waiting for her to gather herself. With difficulty, she finally whispered, I don't want to hurt you. You're everything a husband should be." I remained silent, sensing she needed time to find the right words. "Sebastian," she continued, her voice trembling, "I really love you, but I'm no longer in love with you." At last, she said it. Nora buried her face in her hands. I can't even explain how it happened, her voice heavy with shame and sorrow. Pain tore through me, but I stayed quiet, giving her space to understand her own feelings. "We've been together since high school, from our freshman year," she went on, breaking the silence. "We were always Sebastian and Nora, but now I feel like I need time to figure out who I am outside of that." "So you're saying you don't love me anymore because we seem like the perfect couple?" I asked, confused. "No," she replied with a hint of frustration. "That's not what I mean. Then say it again, I insisted. You said you don't love me anymore, but I don't understand. Please, explain. You just won't get it, she sighed. You're a successful businessman. You have everything you worked for. And me? I feel like I'm disappearing, fading into your shadow. So this is my fault? I asked, trying to keep my tone steady. It's not about your career, Sebastian, she replied, almost with a sense of desperation. I waited, giving her the space to express something that was clearly hard to put into words. Have you thought about seeing a family therapist? I asked finally. That's not exactly what I meant, she admitted, her voice faltering. Then the next step is divorce, I said bluntly. No, not that, Sebastian, you don't understand. I want to find a way to strengthen us, to rebuild what we have, she pleaded. Then what do you suggest? I asked, feeling my patience start to wane. Her voice softened, and she finally said, I was thinking, maybe we should try living apart for a while. I took a deep breath, clenching my fists. All right, I said slowly. Explain it to me. She looked surprised, but I wasn't about to give up. Didn't Amy from your office go through something similar with her husband? I interrupted her. What issue? She asked warily. The one I just mentioned. She felt like she'd lost herself in her marriage. Isn't that the whole point of marriage? Two people becoming one? I continued. So, how long do you think this finding yourself should take? I pressed. I reminded her that Amy and her husband, after some time apart, decided to start dating each other again, even considering reconciliation. Dating? I asked. Is that your plan? While you're away, are you planning to see other people? Or is there already someone specific waiting for you? No, she replied firmly. I told you, I love you. I'm not looking for anyone else. I just need a little space to find myself again. That doesn't answer my question, I replied, keeping my tone steady. And after you leave, where exactly do you plan to go? A long silence hung between us before she finally answered. I thought I'd stay nearby, she admitted quietly. It's different for a man, I said, struggling to contain my irritation. A woman alone, it's riskier. She gave a short, bitter laugh. That's not going to happen. Don't treat me like I'm helpless. Please, Sebastian, stop being so unreasonable. Unreasonable? I retorted sharply, barely holding my voice in check. I'm the one fighting for our marriage, trying to keep us together. How is leaving supposed to make us stronger? You're breaking the promises we made to each other. To be there, for better or worse. Remember those? Sebastian, you're not seeing this the way I am, she pleaded. I shook my head. Right. You keep repeating that we'll stay together. But your promises? They don't mean anything to me anymore. Please don't say that, she whispered, her voice trembling. I'll say it as many times as I need to. What changed? What exactly made you so unhappy with us? It wasn't one thing, she finally replied after a pause. It's more like 100 small things piling up. Like when we were at the country club and the doorman called me Mrs. Brown. I frowned. You were upset because he showed you respect? Is that the problem? No, Sebastian, she said irritably. It's just hundreds of little things that I can't even explain. She fell silent, as if expecting me to say something, but I remained quiet. After a long silence, I pulled 2 folders with legal documents from my briefcase and placed them on the table. Then I opened my laptop, selected a file, and turned the screen toward her. This, I said, and images appeared on the screen showing her holding hands with another man as they entered a hotel. The photos changed every few seconds, each one capturing her breaking her vows. Her face turned pale, and she slumped in her chair, unconscious. I waited, then brought her a glass of water, helping her take a sip as she came to, her expression one of growing panic. How long have you known? She whispered, her voice trembling. How long have I known that the woman who swore fidelity betrayed me? Long enough. I slid the signed divorce papers across the table. She stared at the papers, speechless. You broke our vows. This is the end. Sign, and I can finally let go. She clutched the papers tightly, as if afraid they'd disappear, her eyes scanning the lines that clearly stated that the reason for our separation was infidelity. Attached to the document, Evidence B, were about 24 photos with annotations. When Nora saw them, she screamed, "Oh God, no!" Her fists pounded the table, and she sobbed something incoherent. Watching the woman I once loved finally grasp the irreversible consequences of her actions was not a moment that brought me any satisfaction. As the reality of our marriage's collapse hit her, she seemed to shrink, like a shadow of herself. I wondered if she truly believed I would somehow come to terms with her betrayal. With each new photo, her cries grew louder, and my disgust only deepened. Thankfully, I had taken nearly an overwhelming dose of sedative to withstand this moment. Otherwise, I might have faltered. I would have chosen death over this, but the pill bottle was empty. Nora collapsed to the floor, clutching at my leg, whispering one word, "Please." I resisted the urge to crush her fingers under my heel. Instead, I moved my chair back, staying out of her reach. Even though I knew how it would end, there was still a surreal feeling about it all. Closing my eyes, I tried to convince myself it was a nightmare I could wake up from. But when I opened them again, I remained in this dark reality, where the ghost of my past life mocked me with every breath. The doorbell snapped me back to the present. "I'll be right back," I muttered. Two men entered, carrying boxes. We exchanged a few words and they headed toward the wardrobe in the master bedroom. Hiring movers to pack up my wife's belongings hadn't been cheap, but it was worth every penny. Nora lifted her head, her voice barely audible as she asked, "Who are they?" "Refer to document A. Our prenuptial agreement states that infidelity strips you of everything, including this house," I replied. "They're here to pack your things. I've rented a storage unit near your office and paid for the first and last months. Today, you're moving out." Nora's screams filled the room. "I can't believe this is happening." She curled up, crying. "What did you expect when you decided to sleep with your boss?" I retorted. "Oh, Sebastian, I didn't," she stammered. "Can I explain?" "It's too late. You lied and cheated. There are a few things you should know," I continued. "The lease on your car is under the company's name. I've taken your keys. It will be repossessed tomorrow morning. Your credit cards have been canceled. Your phone will be disconnected tomorrow, and your name is removed from our accounts. No one at the country club will respect you anymore." My phone rang. Looking at the screen, I answered, "It's all set. Thank you." I paused. "Oh, you might be interested to know. Your lover's wife, who is pregnant, threw him out of their house when my investigator handed her these photos." I turned the screen toward Nora, showing her yet another compromising shot. "I warned you he was a womanizer," I reminded her. "But you called me foolish. 2 weeks later, he was in bed with you. His wife threatened to divorce him if he cheated again. And for your information, you're the third woman he's cheated with. You won't need to worry about a life alone anymore." Nora's phone rang. "Let me guess. Your lover with good news?" I snatched the phone and shattered it on the floor, ending the call. Her face twisted in horror, her eyes filled with fear. "You planned every step, didn't you?" she whispered. "Yes. My lawyer will meet with your employer tomorrow. Given company policy, I expect you'll be fired for immoral behavior along with your lover. Do they pay unemployment benefits to idiots?" The doorbell rang a second time. "I'll be right back," I said. Nora sat frozen, her mouth slightly open, making strange sounds. A gray-suited elderly man entered the room behind me. "This is Mr. Jackson, the notary. He'll witness your signature on the divorce papers along with the movers." She asked a faint question. "And if I refuse to sign?" "Then I'll press send, and everyone you know, family, friends, colleagues, people from church, women at the club, will receive an email with evidence of your affair. There's even a video. Do you have anything to say that might change my mind?" Her face went blank. "If you had been honest with me today, I would have done everything to save our marriage. But all you did was lie," I said, my voice trembling with anger I'd held back for so long. "You betrayed me, betrayed us. I hate you like I've never hated anyone, and that frightens me. 3 months ago, you were my everything. Now it's all dead. This is a no-fault divorce. I have a second set of documents stating irreconcilable differences. Sign them, leave my house, and I won't tell anyone the truth." 10 minutes later, her signature was witnessed and notarized. As she waited for the taxi on the driveway to the cheap motel I'd booked for her, she looked dazed, empty. 3 years have passed, and I've kept my promise not to tell anyone, until now. I punished her, left her impoverished and jobless. As far as I know, she never found another relationship and works at a fast food restaurant. And me? I'm a successful man with a wonderful, faithful wife and a little daughter. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel. Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. I stood quietly before Penelope's grave, looking down at the modest stone that bore only her name, a start and end date, the brief outline of her time here. Though the years had gone by since she passed, the weight of loss clung to me as sharply as if she'd left yesterday. My name's Luke Moore, a former officer in the Marine Corps Reserve. No lengthy introduction here, just the essentials. I joined the Marine Corps in 1975, just as the Vietnam era was coming to a close. Starting as a private, I served actively until 1987, then transitioned into the reserves. My first marriage didn't end well. Coming home from a 7-month deployment, I discovered my then-wife with another man, right in our home on base. If anything good came from that marriage, it was our 2 kids, Mike and Melissa. After moving into the reserves, I applied to officer candidate school and was fortunate enough to be accepted. With an electrical engineering degree in hand, I landed a solid job at an aerospace company that worked with the Department of Defense. It was there, at a corporate event, that I met Penelope, nearly a decade younger than me. From the first conversation, we just clicked. She became close to my kids, and my reserve status fit well with her lifestyle. As a reservist, I served 2 weekends each month, plus 2 weeks of training each year. After several months together, I proposed, and she happily accepted. Our wedding was everything I'd hoped for, with a full Marine Honor Guard in attendance. We set out to make a life together, and the first years were full of happiness. We tried to start a family, but our hopes were dashed. 2 miscarriages, and then an ectopic pregnancy. After that, the doctors recommended we consider permanent birth control. Although it was painful, we agreed and moved on. Sometimes we'd discuss adoption. When Desert Storm came around, I was newly promoted to captain and assigned to battalion staff. By 2008, after 2 deployments to Iraq, I returned to find our marriage struggling. By that time, I was a major, serving as the battalion's executive officer. Through all the years, Penelope had given me no reason to doubt her. She seemed as faithful as anyone could wish. We stayed connected at least twice a week by letter or email, even while I was overseas. Monthly phone calls were rare but treasured, and we made them happen whenever we could. Communication was tough during combat, but we did our best. I had faith that our love was solid and constant. Yet near the end of my final deployment, her letters came less frequently, and she was hard to reach when I tried calling. I dismissed it as a side effect of the war's pressures. I emailed her ahead of my return, giving her my travel details, and left voicemails but heard nothing back. I chalked it up to time zones, until I arrived home and saw no one waiting at the airport. I caught a cab, thinking I'd find her at home, maybe asleep. Instead, the house was silent. Too silent. No sign of Penelope, no strange car in the driveway, and nothing visibly out of place, but something felt wrong. On the kitchen table, right next to the coffee maker, was a note. Just a scrap of paper with a few hastily written lines. "Sorry I missed you. Be at Riverside Drive at 11 p.m. tonight. Everything will be explained. Bring the chip." It was simply signed with a lowercase d. No warm greeting, no reunion. Just this cryptic message, alongside what looked like a poker chip with the number 50 on it. Trying to stay optimistic, I thought, at least there's a note. Maybe Penelope had found work, something we'd occasionally discussed when I was away. It was only 9 in the morning, so I had time. Curious, I plugged the address into Google and opened the link tied to the location. As I read the screen, a chill crept through me. The address led to a rundown club by the docks, called the Shadow Lady. It catered to an exclusive clientele, offering a members-only VIP lounge where explicit live performances were the draw. The website highlighted 4-star performers, one of whom went by Darla and bore the unsettling title Queen of the Gang Bang. A terrible suspicion crept over me. Could Darla actually be Penelope, my own wife? I scrolled back to Darla's profile on the Shadow Lady's website, noticing a clickable link on her photo. Against my better instincts, I clicked, landing on a page with preview images and video clips. I made the choice to watch, and what I saw left me sick with regret. It was her, Penelope, my wife of 47 years, engaged in acts beyond description, everything on display in the videos. Her sounds and the footage made it clear she wasn't just present, but fully invested in each scene. Beneath the videos was a grid of blue poker chips like ones I had at home, each numbered from 1 to 50, apparently for booking purposes. A note explained that anyone could reserve a spot for Darla's 4 weekly shows, meaning up to 50 men per night. I had no idea how long she'd been doing this. In disbelief, I shut down the computer, my mind spinning. How had Penelope changed so completely from the reserved woman I'd married? I knew our marriage was finished, but I needed explanations. I went to check the mail, hoping for something that might give me a clue. Only routine envelopes filled the box. Bills, insurance updates, nothing out of the ordinary. Then I checked my phone. One message caught my attention. A note from Dr. Marks at the base hospital, urgently requesting that either Penelope or I get in touch. I dialed right away, reaching him on the second ring. "Good morning, Major," he said. "Glad I could finally reach you." "I just got back from Iraq," I told him, "and haven't seen my wife yet. What's going on?" "Major, this isn't something to discuss over the phone. When can you come to my office?" he asked. I looked at my watch. I'd need a few minutes to get ready. "Give me a bit to freshen up and I'll be on my way," I replied. He thanked me, and I hung up, wondering what could be so urgent. I quickly dressed in my Class C uniform, adjusted my insignia and ribbons, put on my dress shoes, and grabbed my garrison cap. An hour later, I was seated in Dr. Marks's office. The elderly Navy captain, who outranked me, greeted me with a firm handshake. "Thank you for coming, Major," he said. He paused, then asked, "Forgive the personal question, but when was the last time you were intimate with your wife?" "About a year ago, just before I deployed to Iraq," I answered, thrown by the question. He opened a folder and pulled out a document. "3 months ago, your wife came in for blood tests. She tested positive for several STDs and we began treatment. But a later test result showed something more severe. She's positive for HIV. He passed me the paperwork. "We'll need a list of her partners from the past 4 to 6 months. I shook my head. That could be a difficult task. "Why do you say that?" he asked, concerned. "Because while I was away, Penelope seems to have started working as a performer," I explained. "I just discovered this today. Based on what I saw, she's likely been with more than 2,000 men in the last few months, and possibly without any protection." Dr. Marks's face went pale. "This could be a public health crisis. I'll need to inform the CDC immediately. Where has she been working?" "A club by the docks called the Shadow Lady," I replied. "She's scheduled for 4 shows a week and she's expecting me to be there tonight at 11. Major, for your safety, keep your distance. I expect authorities will step in soon and she may be hospitalized. Prepare yourself for what's ahead." With all the details compiled, he indicated that a thorough assessment would take a couple of days, 3 at the most. "I regret that you had to find out this way, Major," he said, his voice steady yet empathetic. "I know this wasn't the welcome home you anticipated." I pressed, "Is there any realistic chance for her recovery?" "Well, technically, yes," he responded, though the look in his eyes hinted otherwise. "But let's be honest, it's almost like a death sentence. Sure, we can try medication, but looking at her condition overall, it doesn't look hopeful. Our primary focus now has to be containing the infection." He paused briefly before adding, "One more thing, Major. I'm not trying to overstep here, but you know this is something the Corps doesn't take lightly. They have expectations for an officer's spouse, and right now she's not meeting them. It's challenging to lead in the field if there's disorder at home." I gave a nod as he went on. "The Corps will be observing how you handle this. I imagine your first thought is to cut her loose and proceed with a divorce." "Not an unreasonable guess," I replied. Understandable, he acknowledged. But given her diagnosis, that might push her to a breaking point. I know you wouldn't want that. It's a tempting option, I admitted, my voice barely audible. Major, this situation isn't easy, but there may be aspects you don't fully grasp. She might be under some kind of coercion, possibly drugs, maybe even blackmail. It could be worth considering a long-term care facility for her. Your insurance should cover it. He offered a moment's reflection. Give her a chance to receive the help she needs, and think about what you want out of this situation. There's wisdom in tempering justice with mercy. That's from General John A. Lejeune, I said, recognizing the quote. It's about showing mercy without compromising discipline. I understand, sir. Honor, courage, loyalty. It's clear. Good, he replied with a nod. Resolve this, but don't let bitterness guide you. We shook hands. Thank you. Semper Fi, he said with a firm smile. Uhura, I replied. Dr. Mark then advised, more like ordered, that I get tested for STDs. Despite not having been intimate in over a year, he wanted me to do it for peace of mind. Following his advice, I provided the samples, then headed home, feeling queasy. With a few hours to spare before I had to be at the Shady Lady, I changed into comfortable clothes, grabbed a beer, and settled into my den to process everything. The weight of it all hit me, and unexpectedly, I broke down, releasing emotions I had been holding back for far too long. Marines have emotions too, after all. Eventually, I drifted into sleep, memories of the early, blissful years with Penelope filling my dreams. I woke up around 9:30, took a shower, dressed in jeans and a Marine Corps t-shirt, and headed out. By 10:45, I had arrived at the club, where a large bouncer blocked my entrance. I showed him a blue poker chip and mentioned that Darla had invited me. He gave a smirk of recognition and allowed me in. Navigating the bar's unfamiliar layout took a moment, but I found my way to the VIP section upstairs. The tables were arranged in a half-circle around a big stage, with oversized screens overhead to ensure a full view from every seat. There weren't many people around, and I scanned the room for my wife. Instead, a heavy-set man with a receding hairline in a flashy pinstripe suit approached me, extending his hand in greeting and guiding me to a table. "So, you're Darla's husband," he said, sounding genuinely pleased. "I've wanted to meet you for some time." "Yes, I am. And you would be—" "Oh, where are my manners?" he said with a smile. "I'm Salvatore Giuseppe, the owner here," he introduced himself, gesturing for me to take a seat. "Why don't you join me for a drink?" A waitress, clad in little more than a skimpy thong, appeared at his wave, adding to the surreal nature of the evening. "What can I get you?" he asked, sizing me up with a keen, measured look. "A Bud Light," I answered evenly, and Salvatore nodded, pleased, before ordering himself a gin and tonic. His expression shifted as he leaned closer, setting the tone for a serious discussion. "All right, listen," he started. "I know who you are. A Marine with a reputation. I looked into you. 2 Purple Hearts, a Bronze Star, a Silver Star, Navy and Marine Corps medals. You've been through it all, from Vietnam to Iraq. People talk." He paused, gauging my reaction. "But let's keep this simple for both of us. No heroics. Agreed?" In a low, controlled tone, I replied, "Salvatore, I didn't survive 2 Iraq tours by being careless. I know I'm on your turf and you've got the numbers. I'm aware of the odds." He nodded, acknowledging my words, and I decided to get straight to the point. "What I don't understand," I said bluntly, "is how my wife became the main attraction at your club." Salvatore leaned back, a faint smirk crossing his face as if he appreciated my directness. He explained how Penelope started out as a waitress at his club. He didn't hide his interest in her, mentioning how seeing her in her skimpy work outfit stirred something in him. "Major," he said, his voice steady, "no offense, but your wife is an attractive woman. She's tempting, yes. But no, I haven't taken it further with her. I don't mix business with pleasure," he added with a shrug. "Still, she's good for business." Holding my anger in check, I struggled to keep my voice even. "How did she get involved with all of this? Was she forced, maybe drugged or blackmailed?" I demanded. Unfazed, Salvatore leaned in, unbothered by my intensity. "To be straight with you, yes, she was drugged once, but not by me," he clarified. We record everything here, and yeah, it rattled her at first. But over time, she embraced it. For her, it became an escape. Now, she's all in. She makes good money from tips and even gets a share of the video sales. He casually placed a stack of DVDs on the table. Consider these on the house. Normally they go for around $300 each. Horrified yet drawn in, I took the stack and leafed through it, each one displaying Penelope in scenes I could hardly process. I knew these could be useful if things moved toward a divorce. How long has she been doing this? I asked, barely able to get the words out. Unfazed, Salvatore replied, About 8 months since she first started filming, 6 months since the group scenes began. She even does private shows now for VIP clients, government officials, CEOs, all types, he said matter-of-factly. A cold realization hit me, wondering about the risks tied to those high-profile clients. Noticing the blue chip I held, Salvatore pointed to it. Penelope reserved a front row spot for you tonight. Those seats aren't cheap. Consider it a VIP pass. I met his gaze. Thanks for the honesty, Salvatore. But give Penelope a message for me. I'm not interested in being anyone's leftovers. Give this to someone else or keep it for yourself. I don't want it. I tossed the chip back on the table. He raised his hands, showing he'd said all he needed. Anything else you need? Sliding my wedding ring off, I placed it in his hand. Give this to her. Tell her to think hard about what it stands for and meet me tomorrow. We need to talk. Salvatore's expression softened as he nodded in understanding. With the DVDs in hand, I shook his hand and left without another glance. I had no desire to see her on that stage, not like this. At home, I climbed into bed, but sleep was out of reach. The following morning, I sat at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee in hand, waiting. She owed me answers, and this time, I would get them. The revolver sat silently on the table, next to a stack of DVDs from Salvatore and the recent results from Penelope's medical tests. I heard the familiar turn of her key in the lock, just as Penelope stepped into the room. She was barely a trace of her former self. Her body, once athletic and strong, now appeared hollow and frail. The strain of regret weighed heavily on her, almost as though she might break beneath its force. Her face bore the trails of recent tears. Penelope, I said, the shock plain in my voice. You look terrible. What's going on? She moved toward me with a slow, weary gait, drained from her nights out. I'm so sorry, she managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. Don't bother explaining it away as just sex, I responded, my voice edged with anger. It's more than that, and we both know it. Her eyes flicked to the revolver on the table, almost as if entranced. What kind of gun is that? She asked softly. Are you going to kill me? Maybe I deserve it. I shook my head. Don't be absurd, I replied. It's illegal, not to mention unnecessary. You've already done enough damage, not just to yourself, but likely to countless others, right here within our marriage. I handed her Dr. Marks's report, which had arrived just the day before. You have HIV, I said plainly. The weight of those words hit her like a hammer, and she collapsed into the nearest chair. Oh God, she whispered, her face paling. I'm going to die, aren't I? And you're going to leave me. Her gaze returned to the revolver. I could end this now, she said, her voice trembling. Listen to me, Penelope, I said, trying to keep my tone steady. I won't go through with the divorce if you agree to start treatment today. She looked up, stunned. You mean it? She stammered, her eyes searching mine. Yes, I confirmed. I'll get you checked into a facility today. There's a lot more they can do for HIV now, and who knows, maybe even a cure is on the horizon. But it's not just about the medical side. You need counseling too. If you stay under my insurance, they'll cover what you need. So, I'll wait on the divorce. With fresh tears in her eyes, she whispered, Thank you. I'm so sorry for everything. I promise I'll make it up to you. She moved toward me, reaching out, but I instinctively stepped back. The image of her with others froze me in place. Seeing my reaction, she looked down and nodded. I understand. After a pause, she spoke again, her voice low. Let me go back, get my things, and I'll be ready to go wherever you need. Maybe that's not the best idea, I cautioned. But she was already reaching for the door, her resolve pushing aside any hesitation. My gaze dropped to the table where my wedding ring lay, left there by her, maybe deliberately. It was the last time I would see her. Later that morning, the news came. A police officer showed up at my door to deliver the details. Penelope had returned to the club, hoping to pack her belongings, and ended up facing Salvatore. She told him about her diagnosis and her plans to seek treatment. In a rage, Salvatore pulled his gun and shot her twice in the chest, once in the head. Afterward, the authorities, police, health officials, and even the CDC raided the club and shut it down. A shootout ensued, leaving Salvatore critically injured. That was 10 years ago. I've since left the force and spend most days out fishing. Yes, Penelope made terrible decisions, and I never had the chance to understand what led her down that path. I hold on to the good memories, though, and maybe one day I'll watch one of those DVDs. She was an unforgettable woman, no doubt. Maybe another woman will cross my path, someone who brings back a spark of joy. But marriage? That chapter is forever closed. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel.